People that listen to our podcast, you know what they want to hear? They want to hear four fucking grizzly bears getting down on some bullshit. That's what they want to hear.
Welcome to the Drivers Project podcast, featuring hosts Dominic Scelzi, JJ Hickle, Sam Haferteep Jr., and myself, Daryl Turford.
The Drivers Project podcast is brought to you by Kaiser Aluminum Wheels. Be wiser, by Kaiser.
We're back with version 2 of the Drivers Project podcast presented by Kaiser Wheels. We actually recorded about 15 minutes yesterday night, and then a tornado decided to roll through my area and knock the internet out, and the internet's still struggling, so I guess we'll start over again. Ever since we started the pod, Dominic has always wanted to do historical pods on the 70s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s. And today we got Bill Wright in from the National Sprint Car Hall of Fame to help us out with that. Bill, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Daryl. It's great to be here. As I said, first time caller, long time listener. So
yeah, you got a busy weekend this weekend.
Yeah, I think we got 4 races in a row. It sounds like so. Jacksonville tomorrow, and then I announced with the Sprint Innovators, so that's Friday at Donaldson, Sunday at Burlington, and then Knoxville sandwiched in there. So, and I'm guessing it'll be Outlaws versus High Limit all the way through there. So yeah, be good stuff.
Dom, you didn't quite win this week, so you're a complete disappointment to the pod. Can you tell us about your weekend?
Yeah, we went to Watsonville Friday night and had some magneto issues. Got it fixed for the feature. Went 8th to 3rd, and then tried to be a hero on a restart and fell back to 4th. So run 4th on Friday. And Saturday at Tulare, completely brain faded in the heat race, made a terrible choice. Lost the heat race and started 8th again in the feature. Got myself in position to be 2nd. And the guy in 2nd kind of shut the lane down. And instead of me sliding across and just securing 3rd, I tried to be a hero and putt the bottom, which you can't do anymore. And it fell back to 5th and ended up running 5th. So should have been a 2nd and a 3rd this weekend, but ended up with a 4th and a 5th.
If we're going to do the 70s, as we're planning to do today, I think people need to understand where sprint car racing was at actually going into the 70s. Bill, the way I understand it, the major things going on in sprint car racing were basically that USAC was starting to sort of lose its power. And at the time, it was basically the pinnacle of short track racing and super speedway racing in the U.S. Sprint car drivers all over the country were getting shots at Indy, and the two things that really killed that in my eyes were the rear engine coming to Indy, and then in the 60s and 70s, they started towards the end of the 60s, early 70s, they started to move heavily towards pavement. A lot of the car owners didn't really want to deal with the dirt, and we were kind of in a transition there. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's fair to say. The rear engines by 67 were obsolete, or made the front engines obsolete. The rear engines did at Indy, and everybody on into the 70s, Gary Bettenhausen really busted his ass at Syracuse, and everybody's making fun of him because he was still racing on the dirt sort of thing. But what people have to understand is back, like you said, back in the 60s, USAC, they were Indy 500. To win the Indy circuit, you had to race the Champ Car races as well. They call it the Champ Car circuit. And that's what we know as Silver Crown today. So the Champ Cars, Andretti, Unser, Foyt, Rutherford, they'd all be racing, the miles at DuQuoin, they'd be Springfield, out in Sacramento, out in Reading, Pennsylvania, all over the place, and that'd be the championship circuit. So they race not only on pavement, but on dirt as well, and sprint cars were the way into Indy. So, there's no secret that all those guys are in the National Sprint Car Hall of Fame because they came up through the sprint cars winning a ton of races as they went, and still winning races as Indy was going on there in the 60s.
Now, that's about the time when cages became mandatory, right? Sometime in the 70s?
Yeah, 1970. So we have in the museum what I like to call the last straw car. So Knoxville always ran cages. They were considered super modified. So it was the super modified capital of the world. 61 was the first nationals sort of deal. And by 69, those super modifieds had more from the square tails, the roofs, all that sort of thing, into looking like a sprint car with a cage, basically a bolt-on cage. So that driver could go race a sprint car race and take that cage off, sort of deal. So in 1969, there was a 25-year-old driver by the name of Kenny Greitz, and he won the Nationals. Big deal, up-and-coming driver, that sort of thing. Everybody's excited. You can imagine, we've seen that in our modern day when the young guys are winning and everybody's excited about it. But 2 weeks later, he takes the cage off in an IMCA race in Nebraska and loses his life. So we call that the last straw car because that was really the last major known death as far as sprint cars go without the cage, because the relatives came in, they sued the track, they sued the sanction, that sort of thing, and people were already pressing USAC and they were pressing IMCA to put cages on the sprint cars. So for USAC, it became mandatory in 1970. So that's where we're starting our talk, is in the 70s, and that's where it started. Now, that doesn't mean that all those cages were real safe that they were putting on there. There were some standards for USAC as far as midgets and things like that with their cages, but not a whole lot. Like if you're going out outlaw racing, which is non-USAC back in the day, you might be like Rick Ferkel, who told me he cut up his kid's swing set in the backyard and made a cage out of it. So that's not going to be very safe, Anyway, so it had a really interesting history going up through there, and that really brings us into the safety factor, which wasn't real good at this point in time.
Now, the drivers who did run cages, they were generally considered pussies, were they not?
Well, yeah, it's kind of like the seatbelt. They put the seatbelts in the 40s, and everybody thought that was for wussies as well. Or they'd rather be thrown out of the car than have that car roll over them, which I can understand, a little bit. You don't want to get rolled over by that car. You don't have a cage or anything like that. But one funny story about it is Joey Chitwood was the first to wear a seatbelt at Indy. Indy banned seatbelts. So he was the first one to come along and say, hey, man, I'm shaking around in my seat. These seats weren't formed to the driver. They're sitting in a couch, sort of deal. And he's bouncing around, and he says, man, I need a seatbelt just to keep myself still here. And they said, well, they allowed it, but they said if you start to crash, you have to sign a waiver. He had to sign a waiver to release that seatbelt. So, in case he crashed, So, yeah, seatbelts, were another thing. And I'm old enough to remember when seatbelts, the law went into effect on the streets. And people were like, I ain't wearing my seatbelt, sort of thing. So I remember that. But I can't imagine it in a race car. But then you bring the cages along, and, Kevin Olson's autobiography is titled Cages Are for Monkeys. And that's kind of what a lot of them thought as they were going. So, and sometimes the cages were probably better for monkeys than drivers, the way they were building them.
It just absolutely blows my mind is, in my lifetime, the thought of not having seat belts or a cage is like, never in a million years would that ever even be dreamed about. And then we think about like Ashton Torgerson's crash at the Chili Bowl, where he was ejected from the car, and that made pretty much every major news channel in the world. And hold on, baby, 1 second. Hold on 1 second. And when you think about it, that was commonplace. A guy crashed, he flies out of the car. And it stopped our modern motorsports world, something as horrific as that. I couldn't imagine being a fan back in the 60s, and seeing some guy flying out of the car. And we've all seen the pictures.
Yeah.
It's just incredible to hear about it.
It was making like Time and Life magazine, a lot of these crash sequences where a guy's flying through the air and his legs down here, sort of deal, and that sort of thing, and they're in the 30s, 40s, the average life expectancy of a driver was like 5 or 6 years. So, it wasn't an old man sport. You know what I'm saying? If you got to 40 and you were still in a sprint car, something was wrong.
Yeah, you weren't winning very much.
You were super lucky, but yeah.
I just feel like that's the equivalent of telling a driver wearing a helmet now that they're a pussy.
Yeah.
Yeah. It just, this is why I know that these episodes are going to be the absolute best episodes, because this kind of shit here is incredible.
I'm going back a ways here too, but when, this is the only time I say motorcycle riders were smarter than race car drivers. They had hard helmets before race car drivers did. Race car drivers wearing cloth and helmet. I don't know what that did other than take leather. I don't know if that kept the bugs out of your hair or what it did. I know it's not going to stop a rock or anything like that. They had to go through World War II, and they decided, hey, these helmets work for shrapnel pretty good. They might work for these rocks that are flying at us, So, it really took a while for that Cromwell helmet to come in, it's just kind of crazy to look back and imagine. And the headlines in the papers, and a lot of people don't know it, but in Knoxville we have the largest motorsports library in the world, just 2 blocks north of us. We own that as well. And you look back at Speed Sport News, and there'd be 3 deaths a week, sort of. And the headline would be Jimmy won, and Johnny set quick time, and Bob died, and it'd be in that order, because people were not shocked by it at all. You just think this day and age, Ashton coming out of his seat, out of the car made headline news, So
and now he's competing again.
Yeah.
It's just crazy.
The race kept going,
Yeah,
I still remember
Jimmy wins, that's what it did.
I still remember we were in the pits, and I remember every driver's girlfriend came back crying. They all came back. They all thought they saw death.
Yeah.
They all thought that
well, we all did.
This
I mean,
could happen to they all thought
that
could happen to their boyfriend, and it had set in, or boyfriend or husband, and it set in, and they were all coming back crying. No guy was saying a word, and it was commonplace back then.
Yeah.
Is commonplace an exaggeration, or
it was pretty common. I mean, obviously they're going to be a lot more careful. They're not going to be pulling slide jobs like we see now. I mean, but they have these skinny tires. They had the same ruts. They're still going over 100 miles an hour. So it was common. We have a photo section in the museum of a bunch of guys flying out of the cars, and one of my stipulations with that is they have to survive. We don't want to show somebody flying out that died, but we have all these guys flying out, and they ended up fine, sort of deal or whatever. But I think it was pretty common. It seems like it was pretty common back then, but I'm sure they weren't going wheel to wheel, like we see today.
So Knoxville took the lead, you're saying, in around 1970 there with Greitz's death.
Well, they had super modified. So if you go to California, you go to PA, they have super modified. So these are modified stock cars, like Howard Kading. They keep modifying these stock cars. They're cutting them down, sort of things, until eventually they're getting to the same shape a sprint car is. And that's what we're talking about. When we get to 1970, we're pretty close there between super modifieds and sprint cars. But Knoxville always mandated cages, because super modifieds had cages and roofs and those sort of things. So, which is a little piece of tin, a roof above them, but kind of acted like a wing sometimes. But so they did that. So their square tail tank rule kind of went away towards the end of the 60s. But now in 1970, we're pretty close between super modifieds and sprint cars. So, yeah, Knoxville is there. I don't think they were not thought of as the leader in safety.
That's what actually was my question was going to be. Yeah. Where is Knoxville at this time? Because now Knoxville has a lot of influence over this stuff. How's Knoxville viewed heading into 1970?
Well, I mean, the Nationals is still a big deal. It's not the big deal it is today, but it was the biggest super modified race in the country. In '61 they had audacity to make it 1,000 to win, and everybody showed up. The promoter was about ready to lose his job, Marion Robinson. He came up with this idea, and I'm not sure he told the fair board. He was kind of like me. I'm better at asking for forgiveness rather than permission a lot of times, and that's how Marion was. He said, "Hey man, we're gonna throw this risk out here and run this Nationals thing." By the time we got to the 10th one, it's a big deal. Joe Saldana won that one, and it's a big deal by then. Especially in the Midwest. There's a lot of great drivers that are in our Hall of Fame from the Midwest in that time span right there.
So I guess we're already on the topics. There was some major innovations that happened in the 70s. Another one was wings, but I just picture like Paul Silva with Larson's car when the header's up, everyone's saying, oh, we did that in the 80s.
Yeah.
Wings became prevalent in the 70s, but they were actually being run before that, correct?
Oh yeah, the first wings were in the 50s. Jim Cushman ran them in Ohio in the 50s. The very first nationals that we talked about, Roy Robbins brought what he called an airfoil and put it on top of the car, and everybody's like, "What the hell is this thing?" You know, all the other drivers, most of them around the Midwest, you know, and they're like, "What the hell is this thing?" And then Audie Swartz put one on, and back then you qualified on Friday night, and if you're in the top 20, you make the race. Otherwise, you're screwed. You know, they run a consi race, but it doesn't transfer anybody. So you got to qualify in that top. So that's how they used to do the nationals for a number of years. So they brought their wings out. They qualified well. They started up front. They ran first and second. And so Knoxville says, that's it, man. You know, we got to ban these wings. So they banned them. And they didn't come back to Knoxville until 1973. And only for 1 year. And Kenny Weld won by such a big margin. He had won without the wing by a big margin the year before. But anyway, so they banned him again. So Knoxville didn't see him again until 1982. Meanwhile, California and Pennsylvania, they're modifying, they're evolving into these wings. So early 70s, still non-wing in Pennsylvania. Mid 70s, they start coming in. And in California, it's more like the big modified stock cars. I'm sure, Dom, you've seen the pictures of the airfoils on top of what looks like a big stock car. Yeah, these are big cars, and eventually they're modified into sprint cars too, and they're going to have the wings. So, you know, Leroy Van Conant, he's one of the big guys in the 70s. Johnny Anderson, Jimmy Boyd, those guys up there, and so. Anyway, yeah, the wings coming in different places at different times. So when people come in the museum and they ask me, you know, when do the wings come about? I say, well, what part of the country you're from? So because it's different everywhere you go. What happened in Knoxville was at the end of the 70s, we had so many serious injuries and deaths that were occurring. Knoxville's a big, fast track. The clay was even stickier back then. These guys are flying around there. I remember as an 8-year-old going to a race in 1979. And two of my favorite drivers died in one crash.
We're going to be talking about that.
Yeah, Daryl, we don't have to talk a lot about it, but Daryl Dolly and Roger Larson. So we get up to 1982, and Gary Scott from Missouri, he's a real popular driver. He gets killed at Knoxville, and the owners just basically boycotted. They said, hey, we're not coming back. Bob Trossel kind of led him. He said, hey, we're not coming back till they mandate wings at Knoxville, and that's when it happened. It was 1982. So long answer for a short question.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Now, I'm geeking the fuck out.
Yeah.
Now, how were the wings viewed? Like, were people, again, was it a you're a pussy thing? Is it these things are badass, these things suck? Like, how were they viewed?
I don't think they thought that too much, especially after they'd seen what had happened. But people don't realize that the World of Outlaws, they were non-wing, man, for 78, 79, 80, 81. There were races at Knoxville in 79, 80 that on Friday night they'd race with the wing. On Saturday they'd race without the wing. It'd be a 2-night Outlaw show. And those were pretty awesome. So, you know, they went back and forth with the wing. So even when the Outlaws came in, there was a lot of non-wing or mostly non-wing racing for them. So
the other innovation that I feel like we definitely have to talk about is at the start of the 70s, they were all running skinny tires. And that all changed with Rick Ferkel. Is that correct to say?
Yeah, he was one of the real innovators. He showed up in California with some drag tires on the back. You know, they'd groove them. They started calling them humpers. Is what they called the tires. So they called them humper tires. And obviously, that's going to give you a lot more control, a lot of those sort of things. And Rick Ferkel was a badass, man. I wish Sam was here tonight. He could tell you, but... And Daryl, I know you know Rick very well, or knew him very well, but he was a badass. He was the Ohio Traveler. He went into Speed Sport News. He said, "Man, they're paying $500 in Florida. I'm heading there." Or they're paying $500 at Ascot. I'm headed out there. So he would chase all the big races, and he'd win 30 some races a year, that sort of thing. They call him the Ohio Traveler because literally he's all over the place, and he brought innovations in. He's no mechanic back then, but he came in with these tires and these different things, and he had some great ideas through those times. And so Rick was one of those guys that really was at the forefront there. And you guys know in sprint car racing, it's monkey see, monkey do. So once he brought those tires in, everybody's starting to do those. And then Firestone saying, hey, man, we need to start making these Firestone Diamond tires and things like that. So that's where it really came from.
So a lot of the story that I've heard back from like Mike Andrietta and stuff, who's a California superstar from back in the day. He was the NARC director of competition for many years, my whole career pretty much. He would tell me that when they first came out, they were running interliners, and they would change the interliner and the outer liner's pressure depending on the track. So some places you'd run a bunch of air in the interliner and, like a certain amount in the outer liner, or you would run, like if it got real slick, you'd soften up the outer liner and run a softer inner liner, and you change them, and you get these different combinations for feel on the different kind of racetrack that you wanted. And I think what it was is it was a soft inner liner and then a big outer liner for wet, and then a soft outer liner and a big inner liner for slick, and all these different things. And like Rick Ferkel, as what I have been told, was the favorite when the Outlaws started. Steve Kinzer was not the worry. It was the Ohio Traveler who was going to dominate the field.
Yeah.
Steve Kinzer wasn't around yet, yeah.
Well, the funny story is that first year, the World of Outlaws, Steve won the title, but Rick actually was, and I think you can back me up on this, Bill, Rick was leading going into the last night, blew a motor in hot laps and didn't race, and that's how Steve won the title. But what we'll probably get into later with Bill is it wasn't that big a deal. Like, the World of Outlaws weren't this massive thing, so like Rick didn't have like this big motivation, like, oh man, I got to get a motor back in, I got to win this title. They really didn't give a shit.
Yeah, I know there's a crown involved for Steve, but I don't know. Ted might have slipped him a 20 or something. I don't know what the prize fund was at the time, but yeah, we're getting towards the end of the 70s, and we can talk about how Steve even got in that car. Because there was a driver before him that a lot of people thought was better that Carl.
That actually leads into the next thing I have on my list to talk about. We don't really have any crazy important moments until 1974, and then a couple really important things happen. And the one that you wanted to touch on was, I believe, who you're talking about, Dick Gaines beating Jan Opperman on the last corner of the last lap by just a little bit at the Knoxville Nationals. Yeah,
and we have to talk about Opperman and Kenny Weld because they were in the early 70s too. But, Dick Gaines, Carl tells a really funny story. Knoxville used to have a kind of a little pond over in turn 3, on the inside of turn 3. And Carl was watching the race on the last lap there in turn 3, and he was looking down there, and Dick was behind Jan the whole race. And he looked at turn 4, and it looked like Gaines was going to have a chance at it. And he turned to who he was talking to, and he said, I think we won that thing. And he turns around, and he just sets off in a dead run, and he goes right into the pond up to his waist. So Carl running to his first Nationals victory, by a waist. And Gaines, they say that was the closest one ever. At half a wheel, he beat Opperman by. So at the line. That is incredible. So, yeah. So Dick Gaines, he was a badass, Daryl. I mean, Carl, he had Larry Miller in his car, and then he put Dick Gaines in his car for about 5 years, and they ripped their wins up. They had 150 wins or so in that time period. And Paul Elrod, who was Carl's
right-hand man.
His right-hand man. He still says, I saw an interview with him just from last week, and he says Dick Gaines is the best driver we ever had. He still says that. What happened was Carl built a lightweight car in 77, kind of like Trossel did for Wolfie that year. And Dick ended up crashing in Champaign, Illinois, and getting a head injury and stuff. And he wasn't debilitated, but he wasn't the same as he was before. And Carl thought he needed another driver for 78. So that's how Steve even came into the picture.
And that was a battle between Steve and Danny Smith, was it not?
Yeah. Both local Indiana guys there, both young drivers, and yeah, it was between Danny Smith and Steve. So I guess the Kinzer name got him in a little bit there.
And then the other guy we got to talk about in that deal was Jan Opperman. Now,
Uh-huh.
from talking to Ferkel, the reason Ferkel ran sprint cars was because
Yeah.
of Jan Opperman. He absolutely idolized Jan Opperman. He saw Opperman go to Indy through sprint cars. He wanted to go to Indy, and he viewed his way to getting to Indy as running sprint cars, just like Jan did. Can you? Jan Opperman's my favorite driver. I never
Yep.
saw. Could you tell people about Jan?
Well, if you talk to anybody who was around in the time, they put him on their Mount Rushmore of sprint car drivers for sure. And there's a book. It's called Dialed In by John Sawyer, and it's must reading for any sprint car fan because it's all about Jan Opperman, and it's hard to put down. It's just so well written. He reminds me of Argabright a little bit about the way he writes. But Jan grew up basically in the woods of the Pacific Northwest. I mean, he was out in the woods. He was barely going to school, those types of things. His dad's a lumber guy, and they end up moving to San Francisco of all places. And of course, he doesn't fit in at all. Man, he's getting in fights at school. All this stuff's going on. He's a great athlete, but he's getting in fights at school and all this stuff. He was a good football player, and he's getting in fights. And because he's in San Francisco, the hippie movement's going on. This is in the 60s, and the hippie movement's going on. And all of a sudden, he has this revelation. It's like peace and love, sort of deal. And, Jesus and all this, Christianity and all this stuff. And he just turns another leaf. He goes from beating people up to just being Mr. Peace Man. So this book is incredible. It talks about all that. But the bottom line is he's a great driver. But nobody in the Midwest knows this. He's racing motorcycles out here. He's in California. He's racing midgets, and he's winning races and stuff like that. And nobody really hears about him. But he shows up at Bob Trossel's in Des Moines. And Bob's like, man, I don't even know who you are. You want to ride here, and I don't even know who you are. So they go to the state fairgrounds in Des Moines, and Bob's got a backup car. And he said, this thing's not set up at all, man, for anybody. It's just something he threw together. And Jan gets out there, and he controls the car. Everybody that's been in this car just comes right off, and Bob's like, holy cow, we might have a driver here. So,
Wow.
Long story short, he just had to prove his way to get up through there. He ends up, and he's very much a nomad. He's living from Montana to rural Nebraska. He moves to rural Pennsylvania, okay? And the big promoter out there, Jack Gunn. Jack Gunn, and he promoted Williams Grove, Port Royal, Lincoln, all of them, and the area out there. And he knew this guy would be a personality to bring to Pennsylvania. So he convinced a local owner there, Henry Hank, and he hired Jan Opperman sight unseen. He had never seen this guy. Okay, so he comes to his house, and Jack introduces him, and this guy's got long hair. He's got this big cowboy hat on, and Hank's like, man, I ain't putting this guy in my car. This hippie from out, and Gunn's like, oh, just give him a chance, that sort of thing. So as we know, a star was born out there in Pennsylvania. He started winning races. In the meantime, we had Kenny Weld, who grew up in Kansas City. His dad's Taylor Weld, his brother's Greg Weld. They're all in the Hall of Fame. Greg was a USAC champion, a national champion. Pappy, their dad, he's a builder. Kenny's a builder. He's an engineer. He built a Batmobile modified. I mean, he reinvigorated the Northeast. This is after he went to Knoxville at 18 and won the Nationals and won 2 years in a row, 64, 65. He goes to Pennsylvania, and he's out there. First, he hooks up with Grimm, the Grimm 88 that Ray Tilley dominated. So he's winning races there. But his big hookup comes with none other than Bob Weichert. So they hook up. So you got the straight-laced, as people thought, Kenny Weld, and you got this hippie, and they're going back and forth every week at the Grove, and at Lincoln, at Susquehanna, and at the port, and it's just great. It's the greatest rivalry. So Jan in '73, he won a record 43 races. Okay, Kenny won 39 same year. So if you're out there and you're going against Smokey Snellbaker, Lynn Paxton, these guys are in the Hall of Fame. Kramer.
Wouldn't
Williams,
it be horrible to be a rookie then? Like, oh
Yeah.
my god,
Yeah.
I'm never gonna win a race.
So anyway, you got this hippie against this straight laced guy, and they're both just ripping off championships. Jan, his team, he ends up with the Bogar 99, which Bobby Allen built one of those cars. So Bobby Allen's rolling around. Steve Smith's moving up here at this time. Think about the talent that's right there in PA right at that point. Van and Dub May are coming in the 70s. Those guys, and it's just badass competition out there. But these two guys are neck and neck, and the fans, they're either loving Kenny Weld and hating Jan Opperman, or the opposite. This hippie coming in, these kids coming in today, that's what they're thinking out there. So that's what happened. So that was just an incredible history there. And Jan just had a magnetizing personality. Unfortunately, I never got to see him really in his prime. I got to see him after he had his first accident, which was in '76. But he got to the point where everybody's like, you got to go USAC racing, man, because that's the series you get to Indy. And so he ends up doing it. He goes up there. They're like, you got to cut your hair. He cut his hair. He got this clean cut deal. And he made Indy. He ran Indy. Before that, USAC went to Williams Grove. He and Weld bought temporary permits, to race with USAC because he had to get a TP to race with them. And they went first and second at the Grove. They just kicked the shit out of the USAC guys. So
the posse was born.
Yeah. So everybody's like, man, you got to go to USAC. You're just gonna do that. Well, it never, as far as car owners and stuff like that, it really never panned out for him. He won races. He won the Wide World of Sports, which was. This is back when we had 3 networks, kids. There were 3 networks on TV. And ABC was on Saturday afternoon, and they'd have the races once in a while. And Al Michaels, who's still going on Thursday Night Football, and Keith Jackson, they were announcing these races. Chris Economaki would be the color, And Jan Opperman, he upset USAC at Terre Haute in the Holman Classic. So, Mitchell Moles just won it tonight, the Holman Classic. But
Can we?
it wasn't on Wide World of Sports tonight. You know what I'm saying?
Can we emphasize how important that win was in terms of, at that time, it's fair to say, the world viewed it as if you weren't USAC, you weren't worth a shit, and that was kind of the moment where everyone realized, hey, there's this whole other world of sprint cars out there.
Yeah, we're just saying, these many people are watching Flow, or these many people are watching Dirt Vision. That doesn't even compare to the back then. You had 3 networks. That was it. You had ABC, CBS, NBC, and you're watching ABC on Saturday afternoon. It's Wide World of Sports, the thrill of agony, the agony of defeat, the thrill of victory, that sort of thing. And, people are watching whatever sport it is. Yeah.
There's also a famous picture of his nose from after that race.
Yeah, he's got a broken nose. He drove right through it. So, yeah, Jan Opperman was bad, and Kenny Weld. There's nobody in our Hall of Fame that compares to Weld as far as a builder, engineer, and driver all at the same time. These guys won hundreds of races. The ironic thing is, in the end, Kenny Weld ended up being a drug addict, and he ended up, going to prison for tax evasion because he was, in his words, he was probably the biggest drug dealer in the East, is what he said, to us after he got out of prison. And, all these people through it, they're like, this straight-laced guy, and then, this hippie coming in and that sort of thing. And Jan, he was an ordained minister. He became an ordained minister. He'd marry fans, at the races and stuff like that. And he'd hand out Bibles. And we have some real cherished possessions at the museum. We have his original hat, his cowboy hat, and we also have his Bible, which he has notes in every page of his Bible. So that's cool too. So we have that on display as well. But yeah, so just to explain Jan Opperman in a nutshell, I'd say read that Dialed In book. It's must reading. If you've read Argabright's books on Wolfgang or Kinsler, this is the same type of deal. John Sawyer's in our Hall of Fame as an author too. He just came a little bit before Dave. But Dialed In, the Jan Opperman story is pretty cool.
What's amazing is I never knew I would have something in common with Jan, but I'm also ordained. So how wild is that? I did Tyler Courtney's wedding this winter, and you look at it, and neither Kenny nor Jan won sanctioned World of Outlaw races. They've raced very few.
They were
throughout
gone.
the time.
By
Yep.
the time
So-
Jan, by the time they started, Jan was not himself, and
Right.
and
Yeah,
then-
well, Weld was working out of it at that time too. I mean, like we said, he won the Nationals in '64. So by the time '78 comes around, these guys aren't racing until they're 50. You know,
Right.
At this day and age, you know,
It's just
now
incredible to
it's
look at all that. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah,
the other thing I think's worth mentioning, I believe Weld designed like a modern day cylinder head while he was in jail. Is that accurate, Bill?
yeah. He also put together a kick-ass sprint car while he was in jail. He designed this thing, and I remember him coming. It was like '87, '88 when he got out of jail, and this thing was fast, man. He brought it to Knoxville and Pennsylvania and other places, but it looked different. It had the angled wings, and he had a lot of things. It's actually in the museum in Lincoln, Nebraska right now, if you want to go look at it. But he had all these ideas in prison. He was just a genius as far as. But if you ask anybody in the big block modifieds out in the Northeast, they say Kenny Weld was the founder of everything out there. He's the man as far as design and modified. So he would race at Reading in a modified and win there, and then he'd race a sprint car at Williams Grove, win the next night. You know, that's the sort of guy he was.
So obviously, like, the All-Stars started in '73, but I kind of want you to dig into the All-Stars and like the start of traveling series and sanctioning bodies, because around that time you'd have like NARC, and then, you know, I'm sure there was a couple others. But what did the landscape look like in the '70s for sanctioning bodies?
Well, you had CRA in Southern California, but they'd go to Arizona as well, Ascot, Manzanita, and those types of things. I consider that regional. The All Stars really were regional too. Ohio, Western PA, almost exclusively. You know, they might get up into Michigan a little bit, yeah, it's really loose. And the All Stars, you know, they were kind of sporadic. 70, 73. You know, they take a couple years off. And then they had late model series as well, but it wasn't until Burt Emick took a hold of them. You know, that was after the Outlaws were really established, that Bud Miller was the originator of saying, hey, we need to put these drivers together into this all-star group in Ohio and Indiana. So he was really the forefounder of, you know, trying to put certain drivers together. Rick Ferkel and Bobby Allen and Jan Opperman and all those drivers. Ralph Corderson was the first champion. So putting those drivers together, you know, was Bud's idea, but it really didn't you know, take shape in a big way until later on. Pennsylvania had the Cars series. We talked about Jack Gunn, the promoter. He promoted that. So they'd go all the way out to Bedford. They'd go Williams Grove, Port Royal, down to Hagerstown. But they'd hit mostly that area. So these are regional series. So nobody's really going national other than USAC at this point in time. So USAC's the one that's going coast to coast. So that's why guys like Opperman, you know, Gary Bettenhausen, Larry Dixon, they're going back and forth. They called it the Larry and Gary show.
That's the next thing I wanted to get into. We've been talking about away from USAC. Well, USAC's still going, and Dixon and Bettenhausen are going to war on each other.
Yeah, they are. I think they won 5 championships, you know, late 60s into the early 70s, really until Bettenhausen had his huge crash. I think Dixon ran like 15 Indy 500s, but he was also, you know, a multi-time champion with USAC too. So obviously they're both Sprint Car Hall of Famers and went back and forth. They're a big part of that. And then Pancho Carter kind of came in the middle 70s. Obviously a common name at Indy as well, 74, 76. His father, he followed him, Dwayne Carter Sr. as well as a Hall of Famer. And Dwayne drove in the old AAA, which was before USAC, it was AAA, which is the same one that tows you off the side of the road, by the way. But they sanctioned all the races, and they're still called the American Automobile Association. And they sanctioned all the races in the early 1900s all the way up to 54, and that's when USAC took over. So, so Pancho Carter, he was huge in that area. You know, you had builders like Steve Stapp and Grant King, who built Indy cars.
Canada.
Yep, AJ Watson. These guys are all building sprint cars as well as Indy cars at that point in time.
Now, of all the guys, like I know that AJ Foyt, Mario Andretti were IndyCar and sprint car and all that stuff as well. But now that we're like late '60s, early '70s, who had the most success from the sprint car world to the IndyCar stuff that was mostly a sprint car driver?
I feel like I could answer that, but I'd need to make sure he's defined as a sprint car driver. It was maybe Gordon Johncock won 2 Indy 500s, but I don't know if he'd be viewed as a sprint car driver. Is that fair to say, Bill?
In Michigan, it was mostly super modifieds, but he took that super modified to Williams Grove and won the Williams Grove National Open in it.
And
Wow.
Rutherford,
He beat everybody out there.
and Rutherford was pretty legit, and he won 3 500s.
Rutherford was a USAC champion. Foyt's a champion. Andretti's a champion. They're all sprint car champions with USAC. So, yeah. So those are all through the '60s. You know, you get into the '70s and it becomes a little harder. You got Pancho Carter. He was driving for a lot of times. But as you guys know now too, the sprint cars are sporadic all the way up through the '80s, '90s. The drivers. You know, you got Ed Carpenter in there and some of. Brian Clausen and some of those guys. Steve Kinzer got his shot, and did he finish 7th? That wasn't good enough to do it again, I guess.
Steve actually had a Steve
was really good.
Yeah, Steve was actually really fast. He just made
and
a
so
couple,
was Jack Hewitt.
Yes, he just made a couple blunders that, like, I think he
Yeah.
ended up 12th. But
Yeah.
like on speed, he was like a 5th through 7th guy in his 500.
Same with Hewitt, right? Jack Hewitt.
Hewitt wasn't quite as fast on race day, but he was definitely wasn't out of place. I kind of like to touch on the Bettenhausen-Dixon rivalry more, Bill, because I think it's fair to say that was probably the most fierce rivalry in USAC history. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, definitely one of them. I mean, they went back and forth, and it was a real rivalry, but they were friends as well. Gary Bettenhausen, I don't know if you guys have seen that documentary they did on him on Flow. It's still on there, but
I love the Bettenhausens.
Yeah. His dad, Tony, great sprint car driver, great at Indy too.
Can you talk?
They just could not.
I know
they just could not win at Indy,
I know it's not the '60s and '70s, but like, can you talk about Tony Bettenhausen's death if you're comfortable? I can just in terms of telling the story.
Basically, he burned to death at Indy.
He wasn't in a car he was driving. Basically, another driver was running the car, and the car was spooking him. And they asked Bettenhausen to drive it just to see if he was. And Bettenhausen was killed in the crash.
Yeah,
Wow.
and but the passion that and I learned this from the documentary more than anything. The passion that the Bettenhausens had to win Indy, that was Gary's focus all through these sprint car races, all through this, and Larry Dixon too, but. Especially the Bettenhausens, man. They're born to be at Indy. They need to win Indy, sort of deal.
And
Gary or Tony or Merle, all those guys.
And you've referred to it twice. That Syracuse crash for Bettenhausen was devastating. Because, Dom, I know you won't realize this. Bettenhausen had just gotten his break. Bettenhausen had just landed a ride with Penske. And then he went to Syracuse. Bill, I can't remember if he was supposed to race or not supposed to race. But he crashed hard at Syracuse. And basically injured his left arm to where it basically wasn't usable. And
the rest of his life.
Yeah, and he still ran the 500 up to 1992.
Ran sprint cars. His first race back, he strapped his arm for a midget race inside in Fort Wayne, indoors, and won it. Just a tough son of a gun, But he went through every fire, He had a fire in California, at Ontario, I believe it was, that the firemen saved him out of, or else he would have perished there. He spent 6 months in the hospital there. After Syracuse, he spent a bunch of time in the hospital, and everybody came and said, "Hey, man, you can't run dirt anymore. This is, Needless to say, he's running a non-wing sprint car on a mile track, at Syracuse, but that kind of went by the wayside after that, and they went to the sprint cars.
It blows me away because while you've been talking, I've been going through like Mario Andretti, AJ Foyt, all these guys' stats, and it just blows me away that they're running IndyCar, NASCAR, USAC, they're running
24
CRA,
hours of Daytona,
24 hours of Daytona,
Le Mans.
the Indy 500, the Daytona 500.
This is why
the Turkey Night.
This is why Kyle Larson's such an anomaly, right?
Right.
You can compare him to Foyt, really.
Yeah.
Andretti.
Foyt won the 24-hour Le Mans.
Andretti,
And Daytona 500 and 4 times at Indy.
Andretti is gonna be the only guy that wins on dirt and wins Formula One title.
Right.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And like I'm looking at the Vukovic family. So Bill Vukovic.
This is another sad story.
Right. Yeah. Well, the entire family, right? But the Vukovics, they're from Fresno, so that family is motorsports. Like that is the motorsports family of the Central Valley. And so I'm looking at Bill Vukovic's, history, and I haven't even gotten to the kids yet. But 2 Formula One wins, the AAA Champ Car Series, 4 wins, 2 Indy 500s. And then a cheeky Turkey Night Grand Prix.
You gotta realize
it's so fucking cool. It's so cool.
He was winning the 3rd straight Indy 500 when he crashed and died. He was gonna win 3rd.
Right.
In a row. He would have been the only guy to ever do that.
This is why these podcasts, the series that we're doing here on the history, is the most that I've looked forward to of anything we've done, because this kind of history stuff I geek out about. And like when I'm looking at these results, like what we're seeing Kyle Larson do in the incredible talent and success and, the reach that he's had, that was every day for these guys.
Right.
They'd win a USAC race. They'd win an All-Star race. They'd go win the National Open. They'd go race the Knoxville Nationals, the Turkey Night Grand Prix, the Daytona 500, the Indy 500. How incredible. What a world. I mean, gosh, I wish I was born in the 50s to be able to see this.
And they're the ones, I'm sorry, they're the ones ripping around Winchester without a cage. You know what I'm saying?
And then
Salem.
Let me expand on that. Bill, correct me if I'm wrong. You were talking about Vukovic having 2 F1 wins. They were shipping the cars to Monza, if you remember that crazy bank track you would see.
Yeah.
Would that have been where Vukovic got the wins, Bill? Like, it was those type of races where they would have won their F1 races, correct?
Yeah.
I'm gonna test you now. Where did Vukovic win his F1 races? Because I see one of them in '53.
I thought it was Monza, but Bill's not giving me confidence.
Where was it, Dom?
They were both the Indy 500.
It was considered an F1 race?
It was considered an F1 race,
Okay.
53 and 54.
Okay.
All right.
Now
which is wild to think.
Yeah. And continuing on with Bettenhausen, I grew up in the 80s and 90s watching Gary Bettenhausen. My dad always cheered for him, and I didn't really know why. But I don't think people realize what a character he was and how realistic winning Indy could have been for him. To give you an idea of his character, there's a famous photo of him in the 90s where he's sitting in his Indy car, and they've actually, Dom, you're going to love this, they've strapped a tube into his mouth. So there's a clear tube into his mouth, and it's attached to a cigarette, so he can smoke a cigarette. Like, everyone loves that Dick Trickle in-car footage of him. Like, Gary Bettenhausen, same thing. And what was unfortunate with Bettenhausen was he lost the ride with Penske with the Syracuse crash, but he was also at the forefront of the stock block Buick at Indy. And what that was, Dom, was basically they were doing this Buick engine without a lot of support, and it was really freaking fast. But every year it would blow up. Or not every year. Lots of years it struggled with reliability in the area.
Which is what pushed him to smoke.
Yes.
Well, you talk about Sammy at the Nationals, how much bad luck he had over the years. He's gonna compete in his 50th Nationals this year, guys, by the way.
Wow.
That was Bettenhausen at Indy. And every little $2 part that could go wrong, that's what happened to Gary. And just the bad breaks that he had all the way through there.
Yeah. So
I don't want to get off too much but fuck, I'm having so much fun here. When was like, hey, you know what? You're an American. You don't run F1 anymore. Was that around the 70s as well?
I can say
I'm not an F1 guy.
We really didn't send a lot of Americans to F1 in the 80s. The only ones I can think of off the top of my head is like Eddie Cheever, and he wasn't a very good runner. I remember by the time Michael Andretti went to McLaren in '93, I want to say, they were already viewing it as like, you fucking American. But that was
so dead in the 90s.
But that was also kind of horse shit. And why I say that is like, Paul Tracy was a top IndyCar driver at the time. IndyCar drivers were getting tests and performing really damn well in these tests. I mean, you're never going to get to know the exact numbers, but basically, I believe it was Paul Tracy did a test with Benetton where they basically sent him out with used tires and was very competitive. Michael Andretti, obviously, McLaren thought enough of him to give him a shot. I feel like there's a couple other tests in there I'm forgetting. Guys would get tests, but they would never be like a fair test. It would never be like, here's our primary car and sticker tires. See what you can do compared to our guys.
Right.
So I would say
I
it
would
started
counter
in
by
the
saying
80s.
Americans pass cars.
Yeah.
Is how I would counter
Yeah,
that.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. There's no Monaco. I guess if it lays rubber, but outside of that.
So I feel like we've covered the middle 70s, early era to the middle. Then we get to 77. That's the next big thing we have on our list, and that is when Wolfgang and Bob Trossel just have the season of the century. Now, my assumption was they were the first people to really attack lightening the car up. You were saying Carl Kinzer actually got
Same time.
Dick Gates.
Yeah, same
Okay.
time. They're shedding about 300 pounds.
Yes.
And
Wow.
what Bob did was he said, Doug, you're going to come down here. And Doug was on the scene, but he wasn't a big winner yet. He'd won a few at Knoxville, but in different cars all the time. And Bob said, you come down here and we're going to weld. And he taught Doug to weld. So he and Doug are building cars over the winter, and they built this lightweight car. It's an orange 20 car that's in our museum right now, but they took about 300 pounds off it. I talked about Opperman. He won 43 in 73. Wolfgang went out and won 44 in 77, so he broke that record. He won at Ascot last race of the year, 44. So that was the big reason, and that's when I came to the races. My parents weren't race fans at all, but they saw this Wolfgang name in the paper every week, and he won 10 in a row at Knoxville. And so my parents took me. He's going for 11. Guess what? He lost that night. But I've never heard anyone booed so loudly in my life as they were booing Doug Wolfgang. He'd won 10 in a row with Trossel, you know. And I'd never heard anybody cheer as much as they did when Lloyd Beckman beat him. Lloyd was doing cartwheels down the front stretch, and the bleachers were still wooden at that point. I remember shaking. I was a kid, you know. It's like, oh, this is awesome, man. So I was hooked right away. So I was so lucky to go. That was my first race. I was so lucky to be at that race where the tensions were so high and things like that. So after that, I was trying to find rides to the track all the time, you know. So
now Wolfgang, he basically said at that time winning the races wasn't even hard. Like in his book, he basically said the cars were such boats they'd go into the corners and just push up, and he'd just turn left and just drive under everyone.
And his eyes were on Indy. He doesn't even remember winning the Nationals in 77, really, because he said, this is just a stepping stone to Indy, because that was always his goal, was to get to Indy. And, you know, he came around kind of at the wrong time there. You get to the end, Sheldon Kinzer, Tom Bigelow, these guys are racing Indy. You know, they're USAC champions in the 70s, but, you know, they're not getting the opportunities that they need. So Wolfgang goes, Sammy goes, they go take their Indy test and they pass them fine. But, you know, they never get those rides that they need at Indy.
Actually, funny story, I was at Sammy's Michigan race that he ran in an Indy car for Pat Patrick, which Dom, just so you know, was a high-end team at that time. And he was actually running ahead of the eventual winner, and he had a tire fly off.
Yeah.
You're shitting me.
Yeah, true story. Yeah, I was actually there.
I've always believed it, like in my lifetime, there's no way you could be better than sprint car drivers. Like, there is got to be nothing harder to drive, control,
Absolutely.
and be successful. And you look at a guy like...
The one I can compare it to is maybe rally racers. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe.
And, yeah. And I just look at...
You look at the greatest ever, you know, Andretti, Foyt, Tony Stewart, Kyle. I mean,
Europeans would be so mad at you right now, Bill.
But it's the truth, though. Like, I just...
Yeah.
Like, there's not a...
You know, I'm not talking about you. But, yeah.
Right, yeah. But, like, you look at these sprint car guys, they're the greatest in the history of the sport. Like, not just sprint car racing. Like, A.J. Foyt, Mario Andretti, all these names that we're bringing up. Like, these are the greatest of the greats of the greats.
Well, to, like, expand on that, bring it through, like, into the 90s. who was the guy? Jeff Gordon, who came from
Sprint cars.
Yep.
Now we're in the 2020s, and Christopher Bell and Kyle Larson have been in the Final Four, 2 of the last 3 years, or one of them's been in it the last whatever years. And I don't know if you guys saw Dover, but Corey Day's coming now. Like, that's a thing now.
Yep. Absolutely.
Makes you proud of the sport that we're in.
Yeah.
Yep. Back to 77, though, Daryl. We get derailed you on that.
Yeah. No, the next one you had there, and this is a guy I'm going to geek out on because I don't know much about him. You just had that you wanted to talk about Bubby Jones as well.
See, Bubby Jones, he became a big CRA champion out in California, but in the 70s, he was like Ferkel. He was traveling everywhere. He was winning races. He hooked up with a guy named M.A. Brown down in Memphis, and they had the 44 car, and they would race anywhere. And pretty soon, M.A. got a second car for Ricky Hood, and they were racing everywhere, all over the country, and especially the Midwest, and they were winning races, and they called him Old Bub, but Bubby was a big time racer in our area. Whether it was Little Springfield, the quarter mile in Illinois, next to the mile in Springfield there, Illinois, or it was Hobstadt, or it was West Memphis. You know, those bull rings especially, those are the ones that Bubby Jones was really good at.
So around this time, like for California, like the king to me was Howard Kading.
Yeah.
Just from the stories that I was told, my grandpa, my dad, they would always go on and on about HK in the 70s. I mean, he would win, I think he won 19 races in a row or something crazy. Yeah. What did California look like back then?
I mean, he's basically in the northern part of the state, obviously. You know, he's at Sacramento and San Jose and Baylands and you know, those places, you know, like we talked about, they got the super modified, so they're morphing into sprint cars. So that's where he's at. And now we got his son Brent. You know, is going to be coming in later in the decade here, and he totally dominated NARC for a number of years there too. But you know, Howard's competition would have been like Al Pombo, Marshall Sargent. Those guys are all, you know, worthy for sure. None of them in the National Sprint Car Hall of Fame, and the reason for that, I think, is the type of car they drove for the most part was the modified stock car that looked more like a big, you know, it was a bigger car and heavier. Not to say they shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame. I think they should be, but you know, they're in the Western Hall of Fame and those types of things for sure. And badass, like you said. And then Southern California, you're talking about Ascot, you're talking about CRA, which Jimmy Oskey. If you ever see Jimmy Oskey at the Chili Bowl, just follow him. He knows where the best food is all the time. You know,
sounds like my kind of guy.
Yeah, but he won 4 CRA titles, you know, through the 70s there. Just a great, quirky, funny guy. One of my favorite guys, Jimmy Oskey. But you know, you had Dean Thompson there, and then Bubby Jones came out there in the 80s, and then Ron Schumann, late 70s into the 80s as well. So, you know, that's what was going on in California at the time. Leroy Van Connet, like I said earlier, I think he won eight NARC titles. You might correct me, Dom, but yeah. I think 4 of them were in the 70s. He had one in the 60s and then a couple in the 80s or something like that. So
yeah, he was a legend.
He was the man, and we just lost him, you know, a couple months ago. But he was an awesome individual, an awesome guy. But he was the guy with NARC, and then Jimmy Boyd, you know, he hooked up with Kenny Woodruff, and they were a really good team. And then you had Johnny Anderson as well, and those guys are all Hall of Famers as far as sprint cars go. And they made their or cut their teeth there around the Sacramento area, as well as Jimmy Sills is coming up this time too in the late 70s. So,
and I'm probably butchering this, but I feel like Jimmy Boyd won the first Outlaw race. Is that correct?
That was actually going to be my segue.
At Devil's Bowl. Yeah, at Devil's Bowl, he won the first one.
Yes, he did. Yep.
And that was the only one he ever won. I do know that he had won one. It was the only one, and I was pretty sure it was the first.
So, yep. Bill, let's get into that because that's pretty much where we are now. We're 1978. Could you talk about how the Outlaws started or were formed?
Hey, hold on. Can we pause real quick?
Yeah.
If this is not the best episode we've ever had, I fucking quit. This is the greatest episode ever. Oh my god! Like this is fucking.
And then
All right.
And then
Go
Bill,
ahead.
before
I'm
I
just worried
talk
about
there,
we could go on forever here, but yeah.
Bill, I'm a little worried because I started getting into that and it looked like you still wanted to talk about something.
No. I was going to say late in '77. Ted Johnson, he comes up with this idea, and he'd been up in Wisconsin and down at Shreveport and places, and he's got this idea to put these drivers together. So that's what he's doing early in '78 is he's trying to get these drivers to say, hey, we're gonna pay this money. Carl needs a new driver. It's Steve Kinzer. Danny Smith is racing for CK Spurlock, and the 18 car. And so they're all getting together here. Wolfgang's coming down. He's fresh off this 44 win season. He's with Speedy Bill Smith out of Lincoln now because he thought maybe he's going to move him closer to Indy, I guess. Bob Trossel hires Shane Carson. They're down there. Shane only won 20-some races that year, so he got fired out of Trossel's car. But, yeah, so Johnson's putting all these drivers together, and they meet in Devil's Bowl. So that's where the first race is in March. And actually, you look at the schedule, Ted made a rule that any race that paid over, I believe it was $2,000 to win.
This is a thing I think I don't
Yeah.
know if today's fans understand is like
Yeah.
there wasn't this set like, oh, you follow the Outlaws here.
Right.
It was any show that was $2,000 to win became
Right.
a World of Outlaw show. So Bill,
So-
correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah,
there
so
could be
Lynn
two Outlaw
Paxton-
shows on one night, right?
Lynn Paxton might win a $2,000 show at the Grove on the same night that Steve Kinzer's winning in California, and they're both considered outlaw shows that year. So any race over 2,000. So that's the way it was in '78. So
And
I don't think Knoxville. I think the only outlaw race they considered was the Nationals that year.
Yeah,
So which
and that's-
Wolfgang won again.
And
But
that's why Ferkel didn't care though. Like it wasn't like this big organized series where you're
No.
like traveling. It was just any race that's 2,000.
Yep. So it took a while for them to get organized. The following year, they went out to Pennsylvania. Lynn Paxton, who's one of my favorite
real
people
quick.
in the world, best storyteller. What's that?
I'm looking at the 1978 schedule. June 10th, Gardena, California. Calistoga, California. Leland
Same
McSpadden
night.
won June 10th. Rick Ferkel won June 10th.
Yeah, same deal.
Yeah.
Yep.
This is the coolest thing in the world. I never knew that.
Yep.
So you were saying about Lynn Paxton, Bill.
But if we fast forward, we got more of a controlled schedule in '79. So, but the Outlaws they'd go through Pennsylvania and the posse they ate them up, man. So Lynn Paxton won 3 in a row, and they're running their big blocks out there. They're running big block motors. So what's Ted gonna say? He's gonna say, hey, we can't run big blocks with the World Outlaws. That's where these real rules started coming in. He wanted this to be a real outlaw thing. We can do whatever we want, but no, we got to protect our own. So that's when it kind of came around. Was
That's
the
why
engine limits and stuff like that.
That's why I giggled today about people that trash 360s. It's like 410s were the 360s.
Right.
410s were the you're not a big block.
Yeah. And USAC was limited to 305s there in the early '70s. So yeah, I mean there was a lot of variations in what was going on, and the Outlaws were supposed to be what they always said: run what you brung, right? Whatever you bring to the track, you can race. Well, that started to change at that point.
And of course, the Outlaws were called the Outlaws because if you weren't running USAC, they called you an outlaw driver.
That was why they were called Outlaws, because you weren't running USAC. That's exactly right. Yep.
Yeah. So they finished that first year. How much legitimacy did they have at that point once they actually got through the year? Like, there's that famous banquet photo of, like, Jesus, 8,000 combined wins that
They had some nice suits and stuff, leisure suits.
Yeah.
I mean, leisure suits from the '70s are pretty kick.
That photo was always in Ferkel's house. It used to just, I used to get a kick out of it. So how legitimate was the Outlaws in like '79, and where were they viewed versus USAC?
Well, I think as we look back at it, it probably appears bigger than they thought at the time. Because we look at all these Hall of Fame drivers who won a skillion races. But at the time, I think Ted was just trying to put that thing together. He's just trying to He's just trying to put something together that the fans want to come see. He knows if he puts Rick Ferkel's name up, if Steve Kinser's name, Sammy's name up, that people are going to show up at the races. And that's a win-win. He's going to make money. They're going to go down the road and do it again. So he had the right idea, and that's why we do what we do. He came up with the 4-wide salute at Angel Park Speedway, which is a crazy place to think of because that's not the most wide place in the world. But that's where Ted first started to do his 4-wide, and he did that before he even founded the World Outlaws. So that's where all that came from too. So there's a lot of history there, and Ted was a big part of it. You can say good things about him and bad things about him, and people do, but he was the man as far as bringing the drivers together on the national scene like that.
Yeah. I had always heard that there were times where the champion hey, you can't cash that check for a few months. You need to chill out and wait a little while.
Yeah.
Now,
one thing that Bob Baker would tell me too. He's the executive director at the Hall of Fame, but he used to work for Ted down in Texas at the Outlaw office, and he said a lot of nights Ted would go to the Outlaw souvenir stand and he'd get money out of it to pay the tow money for the guys that were there. So, and his wife would be screaming at him every time, "You're taking my T-shirt money," sort of deal. But they just they had to rob and take and all that stuff and make it work, and they got to the next track, and and it's grown because of that.
And I think there's something that my generation probably takes for granted is one of the reasons he said he started that series was because he just didn't know who the best was. I mean, you'd have your Weldon Opperman seasons and you had your Wolfgang seasons where there was clear best guys, but with the USAC split, with these guys here, is it fair to say it was hard to say who the best guy in the country was at that time?
Yeah, I think so. Nobody knew who Steve Kinser was, when he started out and when he combined with Carl, and that was just a sick combination there, They didn't. I wrote an article about 25 years ago now in Flat Out magazine, and it was about NASCAR-isms. And one of the things that was just being introduced from NASCAR to sprint cars was the term crew chief. They never used that before 2001, 2, somewhere in there. They'd never used before. They just called them mechanics or, that sort of thing. And Carl was known as a mechanic, so he was like one of the best mechanics. They'd say, he's the best mechanic. Get him a red flag, and he'll make the winning car. But Steve, with the determination and stuff like that, I hope a lot of people have read Argenbright's new book on the Kinser. It's kind of a good insight into where that determination came from wrestling, and his father. He was a tough son of a gun and a great driver in his own right, Bob, and
I think his neck was bigger than our heads.
Yeah, it was. It's bigger than my thighs for sure. Yeah. But
the other thing that's making me giggle is Dom's eyes are just looking down the whole time. And
He's
I know he's just looking up stats.
I am. I'm geeking so hard. I'm looking at I'm just going through the first couple years of the World of Outlaws, and it's let me find a couple. I was just texting my brother about this right now, and okay, let's see. There was a couple in here that it's what on earth? Okay, so on the 21st, there's an outlaw race in Lawton. The 23rd, there's an outlaw race in Calistoga. The 24th, there's an outlaw race in Mechanicsburg, PA. The 29th, there's an outlaw race in West Sacramento.
Yeah.
The 30th, there's an outlaw race in West Sacramento, Syracuse, New York. 2 of them in Syracuse, New York. So there were 3 outlaw races in one day.
You had to have a day race and a night race, at Syracuse.
Dude.
Yeah. Was that 78?
It was 78.
Yeah.
And there's some other crazy things that happened. I don't know what year it was, but if you look at the World of Outlaws all-time winners, you're going to see Bentley Warren on the list. And there's not a sprint car guy in the world from my generation that's going to have a clue who Bentley Warren was. He was a super modified racer.
Yeah. One of the best, if not the best.
The sprint cars raced the super modifieds on the mile at Syracuse, and that's how Bentley Warren got his World of Outlaw win.
Well, I'm looking at it, and I mean, obviously, I don't know all the history, but I'm going through. Okay, Johnny Bieber, heard of him. You got Stevie Smith, we've heard of him. All these guys, and then we get to like Lee Osborne. I haven't heard that name.
You haven't heard of him. Guess
No.
who Joe Gertie considers his mentor?
Lee Osborne.
Lee Osborne. That's who Joe Gertie's mentor was.
Lee Osborne was a car builder and one of the most successful drivers, a multi-time All-Star champ.
If you've heard of an Oz car, that was Lee Osborne.
That's an Oz car, yeah.
So like Johnny Anderson, big name from California name, but then Kramer Williamson, I had no idea he won an outlaw race.
He was
Kramer, yeah.
Johnny Anderson won his on the 23rd of September. Kramer Williamson won his on the 24th. We're talking Calistoga, Pennsylvania.
Yes.
I'm going to compare Kramer to like a Freddie Raymer,
Right.
in Pennsylvania. He traveled out to Knoxville. He raced at Knoxville and other places, but mostly he stayed in PA and raced.
He raced forever.
Yeah.
I raced against him.
Yeah.
At the Canadian
I see.
Nationals.
Shout out to his daughter Felicia, who's probably watching, by the way.
I
And
think
his son.
His son, yeah.
Yeah, I love his son.
Yep.
Gio loves his son. We've had fun.
Yeah.
Bentley Warren won on September 30th in
Syracuse.
Syracuse. Yeah, he won the day race, and then the night race was Jim Edwards, which I'd never heard of Jim Edwards either. Buster Vennard, I've never heard of that. He's from here. He won in Gardena. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Rick Gowdy was a California guy.
Yep.
Like, this is just, it's so cool because I never would have known that. And I've never looked close enough at the schedule to see that. And then, like, when you look at 79, Steve Kinzer obviously champion again. But then the 79 schedule has 83 races instead of 43.
Yeah.
It's very interesting to me.
I'm just gonna leave the floor open here. Normally we do about
Was it-
15 more minutes of the show. Just talk about whatever you guys want from the 70s.
Was it a little more patterned in 79 or not? Or was it still all over the place?
Let's see. So they started in Florida, 4 nights in Gibsonton, Florida.
So
Yeah.
East Bay.
And
East
then,
Bay.
that's
Yep.
what it is?
Yep.
And then they went to Houston, then Tulsa, Mesquite, West Memphis,
That's
So they're
Illinois.
following the schedule.
That's pretty logical there.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Like they went Illinois, Ohio, Iowa, Michigan, Illinois, Indiana for quite some time. They ran 2 races in Indianapolis, Indiana on the 19th, so they must have run a double show. Then back to Illinois, Ohio, Kansas, Colorado, then out to California, up to the Dirt Cup in Skagit, Winnipeg, Minnesota, back to Indiana, Ohio, Nebraska, Indiana. I mean, a fucking ton of racing and a lot of traveling. Back to California in September, Arizona, Illinois, and they finished at Eldora in October.
Well, it's fair to say, Bill, travel was a lot easier then, was it not? Like it was, like in terms of like you didn't have to bring a big rig. Obviously, you were driving a shit box compared to what we're driving today. But you didn't have the gas costs. Like in some ways it was easier, some ways it was harder.
Those guys tell great stories about traveling. Jack Hewitt would get in a vehicle with Hod and Shield, and they'd drive across the country. With their mechanics, and it was just great stories. Jack could be this little 16-year-old kid, and then you'd have, or Hod and Shield would, and then you'd have Jack Hewitt in there too. And, they just tell great stories. Kinzer talks about he just laid down in the back seat, and Carl would drive the truck, and Paul Elrod would be in the passenger seat, and they just drive across the country, like that. And
that's actually a thing that hasn't changed. Dom, I think you'll back me up on this. I think the sprint car world, my brother said this. He said we should literally do a show where we just put a camera behind a team and just listen to the conversation as they travel. Because
that'd be really interesting.
Legitimately one of the reasons I wanted to start this pod was I always remembered my first year on the Outlaw tour, we'd leave a race, and Rick and Sam would when Rick was his crew chief, they'd debrief, and I was like, I'm the luckiest guy in the world. The whole sprint car world should get to hear this conversation. Us driving to races with Rick, just asking him about his time, like the driving is the best moments are in the travel, are they not, Dom? That's true to this day.
Absolutely. Like the stories that I've heard throughout the years are incredible. Guys winning races with, shocks that came off the car, all kinds of shit. It's incredible to me hearing these stories from like Rob Hart is the guy that comes to mind. When I ran with Rob, like the stories I'd hear would be like, are you fucking serious? Like how could that have happened? Or like teams that almost happened, and all these really cool like there's just such cool stories that they never do make it to the public, and it's like you get this piece of history that you didn't know about. And I feel like this podcast is the closest thing to that, because it's like we're literally just talking stories, and yes, we have a history timeline we're going with, but like I never would have realized, because I've looked at the Outlaw schedule from '78. I never would have realized that it was just like, hey, any fucking race. You know, that's incredible. Yeah. Judging by that logic, I've got a couple Outlaw wins.
That's what I love about this show too. That's why I watch you guys or listen to you. I'm usually mowing or driving down the road, but you know, it's just you guys aren't shock jocks and stuff like that. You're just chewing the fat here, which I enjoy. Rick Ferkel, somebody who traveled with him told me, you know, if he won, you'd eat at the restaurant. If you'd lost, he'd get a bag of butterscotch candy.
I can tell you,
and that'd be your dinner. Would be the butterscotch candy, you know.
This is where I wish Sam was here. He was on yesterday, but he couldn't make it today. This is where I wish Sam, like, Rick was such a neat guy to get to travel with. Like, I would ask him, like, these naive but obvious questions, like, hey, Rick, like, what was your best Knoxville Nationals? Because I knew he'd never won it. And he's like, Daryl, you don't get it. And I'm like, what? And he's like, I don't remember the Knoxville Nationals. Like, to me, it was that race was done. Yep. I grabbed the Speed Sport News, looked for the next race, and moved on. I think, Bill, you saw a personal one between Joe Gertie and I. I don't think people realize how much that is true for racers from the past generations. Dom, I'm going to tell you a story that Bill was there for. So my first race with Joe Gertie, we go to the Knoxville opener. It's pouring.
Fuck.
We know we're not going to race. So Joe and I decide to go to the Hall of Fame, and then we go up into the theater, and we throw on the 1990 Knoxville Nationals, because it's my favorite Knoxville Nationals by a mile, and we'll cover
Bobby Allen.
We'll cover that when we get to the 90s. And as we're watching, like, Wolfgang come through the D and the C, I look at Joe, and I'm like, Joe, you had a pretty good run here. What was your best Knoxville Nationals ever? And he's like, I think in 92 I ran 6th. It was that Nationals. It was the 90 Knoxville that one. Like, the older generations, like, to them is just go to the next race, go to the next race, go to the next race. And it wasn't...
am I right, Dom? If you don't win, you're on to the next race. You're not
I mean, there's so many times where, like, my brother will bring up, like, hey, have you raced here? I'm like, fuck, I don't remember. And then I'll be like, oh, I ran 14th or something. It's like, you don't even know. It's still that way. Like, it's just like, yeah, whatever it was. Then I will say the Nationals, though, like, I think guys are more conscious of how they did the Nationals, because it carries so much weight now. But, like, yeah, no, it's 100% true. Like, it'd be like, fuck, you know, it's just
and the
another
Nationals
race.
didn't always pay the most.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
there were higher paying races. When Earl came out with the $50,000 Kings Royal, that was like they thought he'd lost his mind, you know, sort of deal. So
yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, Bill. We ran at Hutchinson, Kansas last year, and one of the things people were telling us there was the Hutchinson Nationals were bigger than the Knoxville Nationals at one point.
Well, I don't know if they were bigger at the time, but you had the Western World in Manzanita in the 70s. That was huge. You know, Opperman won that, and Eddie Levitt, and some of those guys down, or Earl Wagner, some of those guys down there. And then you had the Pacific Coast Nationals at Ascot, and those were the three crown jewels: was the Nationals, the Western World at Manzi, and the Pacific Coast at Ascot.
Yeah.
And now 2 of those are gone. You know, the Kings Royal came in, the National Open is what it is, and the Gold Cup is what it is now. Everybody can't go to that now. It's not where everybody goes to it.
I used to, when I'd go to Rick's shop, Rick wasn't a big trophy display guy. He did have when they did the top 100 drivers of the century, they gave them all like this, I don't know what you'd call it, like a big stone with like the top guys all on there, and he had that displayed in his family room. Mm-hmm. But like the trophies he had in his shop were like the Western World and the Pacific Coast Nationals. But I couldn't figure out why. I was like, why do you won all these races?
They were the biggest races.
But I didn't know that.
Yeah. They were right up there with the Nationals, so he would remember those, I'm sure, if you asked him.
And for the record, he did say his best Nationals was a 21st to 3rd, but he didn't remember many details of it.
Yeah. 75, I think it was.
But I think you've done pretty good here. I'm pretty happy with the 70s. Bill, I know you listen to the show because you tell me everything we got wrong every time you see me at Knoxville.
Oh, absolutely.
So, then you know we talk shit at the end of the pod.
Well, I gotta talk about Dom not knowing Jimmy Carr was in. I mean, that was his crew chief guy. But I gotta get on him about that.
Hey,
But
I knew Jimmy was in because Paul and I were the ones that sent the stuff in.
Yeah.
So you're
Well, you
just playing
should've
it too.
I was playing it dumb because I didn't know if it was announced yet publicly. I didn't want to be like, oh yeah, I knew that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. People might not know this, but I started as a journalist like 30 years ago, or as a writer 30 years ago with the racing stuff, and you guys still got me here?
Yeah.
Got ya.
You just
Okay.
froze. Your face just froze though.
Okay, well, there we go.
There we go.
Anyway, I started as a journalist 30 years ago. Alan Holland, who's going in the Hall of Fame this year as host head, he gave me the chance to start writing. So I've written for all the magazines and stuff like that over the years. But I'm going to talk shit about the current media, okay?
Uh-oh, that's us, Dom.
Anybody with a cell phone can get a podcast, right? I mean,
Oh, God, he's really coming after us.
some of these are embarrassing, and I'm not talking about your guys, of course, because I listen to your guys' actually, but some of them are embarrassing, and it's just like, come on, man, and nobody reads anymore. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yep.
I still write the stories for Knoxville. I write race results and stuff like that. It's like people want to know the details of this. Okay, Alex Neaton's a good friend of mine, and
I love Alex.
so's Walkopedia, Brian Walker.
Yep.
But they do a great job writing their releases, but have you noticed anything about the results? They don't have complete results. They just show the feature race.
Yeah.
Why are you not showing me complete results?
Yeah.
I mean, that's, Dom might have been in the B main. We don't even know he's there. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? It's like,
That's recent too, because I think it should be everything, qualifying down.
yeah, I know it's recent, but when when Walk started with the Outlaws a few years ago, I said, hey, Walk, we got to put complete results in there, and he did for like a couple weeks, and then he didn't. I think the higher ups are saying no, don't do that, and so I don't know why they don't do that, but that's one thing that drives me crazy, and I know that's not going to bother most people.
Well,
but a lot of it's the podcast, and it seems like people are like 12 years old, and it's like, man, you don't know your ass from your elbow, basically. So
basically, Bill says all the other podcasts except for us suck.
That's right.
I do have some Hall of Fame related stuff, and I know I don't remember your exact wording, so some of this might be touchy for you, but I don't give a shit, Bill.
yeah.
We're gonna give you some names, and you tell us if they belong in the Hall of Fame or not. I've already checked you with one, Brian Monteith. This one matters to Dom.
All right. First thing is I don't decide who goes in. I wish JJ was here to tell. And it doesn't matter if you drive at Knoxville. We have more Hall of Famers from California than we do anywhere near us. So we have voters across the country who vote on such things. We have about 50 some voters now, I think. So actually went to a sports convention a few years ago, and they ranked us on the hardest Hall of Fames to get into, and we came in second behind baseball. So ahead of football. It's easier to get into Canton than it is Knoxville. So not an easy place to get into, especially in a couple of the categories. But talking about Brian Monteith, the Edge, as we call him, right? He was really good out there in Pennsylvania. I think I don't know what his win totals are. You probably have them in front of you, but really good at Lincoln. Yeah, really good at Lincoln for sure. Really dominated there for a time, and he was going up against Freddie Raymer and guys who were really good there at Lincoln. So yeah, I think he deserves a consideration for sure.
Who's one from you, Dom? I got another one quickly.
The one guy I have would be, and it's a two-parter, Tim Kading to me. Obviously, he's still too young. So asking if Tim Kading would be in, and then what are the parameters that you guys look for when you are going to put someone on the panel?
Well, you have to be 50. You have to, or you have to be out of the sport totally for 5 years. So, like Levi Jones, he's been out as a driver, but he's only 43 years old. But but he's in the sport still. He's promoting Eldora, so he wouldn't be eligible. So, like when Mark Kinzer quit, he was done. So he was in before he was 50, however many years later. I used to be a voter before I worked for the Hall of Fame, and I think I nominated Mark 2 or 3 times before other people caught on. So the voters have to know. You don't need any sheet of paper or anything like that to nominate somebody if you're a voter. You just need to know that they're above 50 and those types of things. What those sheets of paper do, or those bios that we send out, is they let the voters, or just put that name in front of the voters to know, hey, these people are eligible, consider them, sort of thing. So I lost track of your question.
Tim Kading.
Tim Kading. How old is Tim now?
He's probably 45.
45? Yeah, he's for sure. He's going to be a for sure. He's a knockdown, drag-out for sure Hall of Famer. He probably won't even need anybody to write a bio for him.
He won 9 Outlaw races in a year. He didn't follow the Outlaw Tour.
He's won all over the place. Yeah. Tim's won everywhere.
I think he's an on him. What do you feel like is the standard now? Like, I've talked to you a couple times, Bill, and I don't think people realize, 20 wins with, the World of Outlaws is pretty impressive, and I don't know if people realize that bar. I was going over with you, and it's once you clear 5 Outlaw wins, it's you're pretty
I'm kind of surprised.
Good.
I'm kind of surprised some of the guys that aren't in the Hall of Fame that have that kind of wins with the Outlaws, like Johnny Herrera won the Kings Royal, Andy Hillenberg.
Hillenberg was my next one for you.
Kerry Madsen, he's 50 now. Those are some of the guys that come to mind that have those Outlaw wins that are eligible. Obviously, there's guys running with the Outlaws now that are going to be shoe-ins later on,
but I don't think people realize that. Every time I explain that they're shoe-ins, people push back hard that Carson Macedo already has a Hall of Fame. Sheldon Hodenshield is already there. I don't think people realize this.
Well, I think too, people look at the big races too. Kerry Madsen won the Kings Royal, and so did Johnny Herrera. And Herrera's done a lot of other stuff and had a lot of other wins. He's a 2-time Knoxville champion, track champion, and so he's done a lot of other things too. But I think they look at that too. So I think that's maybe a roadblock for a guy like Andy Hillenberg, because he had a lot of big wins. He had a lot of 40-some Outlaw wins. Am I right? I'm not even looking at the list.
High 40s, I want to say.
But he's going head-to-head with Steve Kinzer, Sammy, all those guys all the time.
And not missing a race for
And not missing a race. It's I think Brad Doty told me he finished second 40-some times one year to Steve or something like that.
Yeah,
something crazy.
It was in '87. He finished something second 21 times when Steve won
Yeah, we have Steve's '87 car in the museum this year for our Knoxville display, just because he dominated that year, 50-some wins. But, so some of those guys Kevin Huntley's a guy who won, I think, 50 races with the All-Stars and was a 2-time, 3-time champion, and I'm surprised he's not in. Even Joe Gertie.
That one pisses off Sam. We never say it because he's obviously connected to us.
With the All-Star Championships and the Outlaw wins as well.
And a top crew chief and his association with Gertie.
And he was in there with the engine building too, with his dad, who's in the Hall of Fame. Yeah. But even more than the drivers, I look at a lot of owners, and Dom can probably name, I'm guessing he can name a half a dozen owners from California that deserve to be in the Hall of Fame that aren't in there. Now, Clyde Lamar.
Dennis being in now. Clyde Lamar was the first one I thought of.
Maury Williams.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Those
Maury.
are no-brainers to me.
Is Roth in there?
Yeah, he just got voted in last year.
Yeah, it took him a while. I mean, so I think the car owner category it's in there with the mechanics, and that's a hard one to get into, I think.
Ricky Warner.
You only get 2 a year.
Get in first try, right?
Yeah, Ricky Warner had to wait a while. Jimmy Carr's this year, so there's a lot of mechanics I can think of too out there. I was talking to somebody about Davey Whitworth the other day, and just different mechanics over the years. You guys could probably think of a lot, but it's a hard place to get into, and I don't think people understand that. And just because somebody doesn't make it the first time, that doesn't mean, that means they're not Steve Kinzer or Tony Stewart, right? So
now, for what about for a regional guy? Because there's 2 guys that come to mind to me that in my brain 1,000% Hall of Famers for the West Coast. I don't know if they make the National Sprint Car Hall of Fame. I guess for me, just being out here, I say for sure. But like Jonathan Allard and Kyle Hurst, two guys that I feel like, obviously neither of them are eligible yet, but I feel both of them, I mean, with their accomplishments in the sport, for the West Coast mostly, they make it in with blind colors.
You guys were talking about career NARC wins recently on one of these. And Hurst is up there, right?
Yeah, he's 31, and John Allard has 41. John Allard is third all-time, and Kyle Hurst would be fifth all-time now. Justin Sanders just passed him.
And does Brent Kading have like 287 or something like that? Or
he has 83, and Tim Kading has 76, something like that.
Yeah.
So he's within 10.
Yeah, those guys are definitely consideration. I'd put them in, like Lance DeWeese had to wait a while. He had over 300 wins. 300.
Yeah.
There's no
Terry
way
McCarl had over 300 wins, and he'd won at the Grove and all across the country.
Yeah.
San Jose, all across the country, and he had to wait a while. So those are lofty numbers.
Yeah.
So what voters are looking for, I'm not sure. I think when I walk through where the plaques are, of the people that were in my era that I watched, I could point at, I'm going to say 95% of them say, I was at a race one night where I knew they were going to win unless something didn't happen. Yeah. Whether it was Gary Wright or Danny Lasowski or Steve Kins or whoever it was, Wolfgang or whoever it was, I can walk through there and say, I knew going into that race that night that they were going to win. There was a year at Knoxville that I knew every time Gary Wright was coming, he was going to win. Whether it was 410s or 360s, it didn't matter. And I think he had 4 wins that year, and I think that's about how many times he came. So I can walk through there, and I'm going to say 95% of those guys that are from my era. I was at a race where I thought, they're going to win tonight unless something goes bad. So there's kind of that tangible that you just kind of feel when you go through there. So whether it was a car owner or a driver or a mechanic, they were damn good. When you go through there.
Is Gary Patterson in the Hall of Fame?
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, what a great episode. This has been just a dream.
So, Bill, we think we got to get you. We agreed. People aren't going to know, but your computer died there.
A
few minutes ago. And
that was an old man. That was an old man issue. I just let it power off. So.
Yeah. We had already agreed with you to do the 80s with us next for the next time we get together. But while you were gone, trying to being an old man, Dom pretty much said that we need to get you on for the 90s and 2000s as well. Are you up for joining us for those?
Absolutely. What's wrong with the teens and the 20s? I mean,
I feel like
we're rolling.
I feel like, what kind of inspired this for me? Like, we have Dom's end of it, but like right now I got a 16-year-old kid on Sam's team, Brody, and he lives and breathes sprint car racing, and like, you were there, Bill.
He enjoyed his trip to the Hall of Fame, I think.
Dom, we took him to the Hall of Fame because Sam and I realized he didn't know who Workin' Woody was.
Oh my God.
So I'm starting to realize that we're having this generation of sprint car fans that don't even know what we consider modern. Right. So I do feel like it's important to go all the way up to like 2010 because, like I say, we are starting to get a generation of sprint car fan that like didn't know who Workin' Woody was. Like, there was Sam and I routinely ask him like, "Hey, do you know this guy?" And it's like, it'll be like Jason Myers, and you're like, not sure he'll know.
Not in the Hall of Fame yet. Art and Carol Molly's either with Workin' Woody. They're not in the Hall of Fame yet either. So
that's
there are other
ballot.
people. Yeah.
I was thinking about it when you were saying the plaque thing. It's like you got to be iconic.
Yeah,
it's almost like the. That's almost like the standard is like you've got to be borderline iconic.
Go through there, you see Joey Saldana. There was a time when he was just in that 9 car was just dominant, or you're walking by, like I said, Gary Wright, or there's just even Terry Gray, USCS. I don't know how many championships he had with USCS, but he dominated that part of the race. the racing. So
with that being said, we're going to add about 30 minutes to this because now I'm going to go on a rant, and that's one of the things that like I always think about is so like we talk of like the USCS. I think some guys might get snubbed because and rightfully so because you're only as good as the series you're racing, but you know a guy that goes out to the on the World of Outlaws and wins like 2 or 3 races throughout his career and is a 7th to 14th place guy, if he's at home, he wins 70 races, still wins those 2 or 3 Outlaw shows. Everyone's like, this guy's for sure a fucking Hall of Famer. Like Anthony Macri, for example. If Anthony Macri went out and traveled and would win 1 or 2 Outlaw races a year, or 1 or 2 high limit races a year, everyone would be like, yeah, Anthony's all right. Like he's good. But what we know him as reality, it's like, holy fucking Anthony Macri.
Well,
like, and that's where. Go ahead.
This is a conversation Bill and I have had. Like, I was being nice earlier saying 10 wins. If you go down the World of Outlaws win list, and I bet you'll do this right now that I say it, Dom, it's really 3. The number is 3. Yeah. And when you start looking at the guys that have 3 World of Outlaw wins, and you ask yourself, what would this guy have done if he raced regionally, you'll be like, he would have won like crazy.
Yeah.
Like, like we brought up Joe Gertie, right? Joe Gertie only has like 9 or 10 Outlaw wins, and you don't go, oh my God, Joe Gertie. Do you realize, like, he was All-Star champion and gone? Like, he probably would have went on like a 4 or 5 year All-Star champion run, like, and he was a 10-time Outlaw winner, like, not some crazy. But
there's not many drivers like Paul McMahon comes to mind. He wasn't a huge winner on any of the series, but if he would have raced regionally, he's kind of what you're talking.
Well, look what he did in '95 in California. '95 in California, he just murdered everybody.
That's kind of what you're talking about, Dom. So I totally see that too, and again, it's up to the individual voters, and there's a lot of them, and that's why it's so hard to get in because. I talked to the guy from the Canadian Golf Hall of Fame. I said, how do you decide who gets in your Hall of Fame? He says, well, I decide. I came up with Hall of Fame, so he decides by himself.
Wow.
He just decides who's in.
There's so many examples of it, like Shane Stewart. If Shane Stewart didn't have that run into the end of his career, people wouldn't say he should get in. And it's like...
Yeah, he'll be in, no problem. Shane Stewart.
But it's like, okay, now watch what he would have done on just a regional series. Watch what he was doing.
Right.
And I guess that's where when my mind goes to questionables would be like a Jonathan Allard. Jonathan Allard with 41 NARC wins. He had I think he had 4 Dirt Cups, 2 or 3. I think he had 3 Trophy Cups. Like when you think West Coast, one of the absolute pillars from the 90s on. Had success, at Knoxville, ran well at the Knoxville Nationals, made a few Nationals.
He was parked beside us one year when Sam and us both made the Nationals. He was parked right beside us in the Williams Zero.
Multiple-time New Zealand national champion.
So I was going to say, you can't count New Zealand, but he won multiple championships over there. Yeah.
Right, because that don't count for here, but, right? Or does it?
No. Not supposed to, yeah.
Yeah, and so, I think of a guy like that, how incredible. And then I think of Kyle Hurst with... kind of the same thing. John Allard had 1 Outlaw win. Kyle Hurst had 1 Outlaw win, but tons of success in championships in the NARC series. He never did win one of the 3 crown jewels for the West Coast, but won the Australian Sprint Car Classic. Had a lot of success on the West Coast, and it's like you're not quite there. Are you there? Because to me, if there's a West Coast Hall of Fame, both those guys are first balloters.
I'm sure they will.
And then you look at the national thing, and it's like. Man, I don't know. And then if Kyle Hurst doesn't cut his career short, he was 33. He could still be winning races.
I'd put Allard in the same category as Monteith. I mean, really, because they could beat the best in their areas, and then Monteith. I'm trying to remember. He made it to the Nationals once, I think.
Yeah, that was.
He drew last. Did he draw last?
Yeah, Sam and I heavily influenced that. That year, Sam was racing in Pennsylvania, and the back of our shop was basically like 100 yards from the back of the Premier Auto Works shop. And over time, we became really good friends, and we'd be racing there, hanging out at their shop every night. and then they'd go see us run somewhere, and we kind of over the year were like, you got to go to Knoxville. It's the best party. It's the best race. It's the best. And we convinced them over the course of the year to do it, and then they went out. They drew last. It was.
They spent one night there. Yeah.
It was hellacious for them, and they didn't. They just went right back to PA.
They went back to the Grove. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the deal, though. It's a tough thing, and like I said, if you look at that driver, I can remember a time at Lincoln when I knew Brian Monteith was the favorite. When I was sitting there watching the races, and there was times when Jonathan Allard, he was going to win the NARC race. So that's what I'm saying. You look at these drivers, you're like, they were dominant at their time, for a period of time, more than 1 or 2 years, at that level.
You almost have to be the peak guy for the better of a decade.
Yeah, I would say that's the way it's trended anyway. Yeah. So,
what a great conversation.
Yeah.
What a great podcast. Like, hands down my favorite podcast by not even close to a long shot.
I think every driver should celebrate their 50th birthday, so all the voters would know that, hey, they're 50, we can vote for them.
Yeah.
Because we had to look up Monteith's age, didn't we? Because I didn't know.
You looked it up for me,
Yeah. So.
The Edge, hammer down.
He was incredible. Like, we were hanging out with him, like I said, and we'd go to Lincoln, and it felt like every second night they were coming home with a check, and then you'd be in their shop, and it'd be like all these insane, like, Gobrek Memorial.
Yep.
I forget, did they win the Dream at Port Royal? Was that the race they won?
Yeah.
Like,
the Hank Gensler Memorial.
Yeah,
probably.
if you just looked at their shop, at the checks, you'd be like, yeah, they're Hall of Famers. Like, automatic.
I feel like he even won into, like, the Dirt Classic eras.
He won a Dirt Classic, I believe.
Yeah.
I'm basing that on, I think I remember a Dirt Classic check.
I could have swore I saw a Dirt Classic check when I ran the 21.
Yeah.
But
Van May's another guy that I think was really good that did in the 70s.
He was 70s, yeah.
He's bashing his head against all these, these big dogs in Pennsylvania too, like Williamson and Smokey Snellbaker and all those guys, Lynn Paxton and Bobby Allen. Yeah.
You were talking about the competition there, and I always think back to like this TNN race I watched at Williams Grove years ago, and they were talking about like, oh man, it's a race between Lance DeWeese and Fred Raymer to get the all-time win lead at Williams Grove. So this is late 90s, Dom. What do you think the number was?
In the late 90s?
Yeah. To be the all-time Williams Grove feature winner.
Man, I'd say 100.
It was like 40.
Yeah.
Really?
I think Paxton was tops at like 35 or something when he retired.
Well, because DeWeese has it now at like 145 or something.
Yeah, but this is what I'm saying. The competition was so good.
Yeah. The first race I ever went to at the Grove was an Outlaw show, and they used to lock in the top 4 on the first night. And the first night I was there, all 4 were Pennsylvania drivers. We had Dave Ely, who's now at DMI, He was one of the top 4. Lance DeWeese, Keith Kaufman, and I think Raymer was the other one, I think. So they locked all 4 positions in the first night. I said, this is PA, man. This is the difference between here and a lot of other places. So it's not quite that way anymore, obviously, but you see some of the teams building up out there. Chase Dietz is getting a lot better, and
I got written today by a Robbie McQueen from Carson Macino's team, and he wanted us to comment on whether or not Chase Dietz is ready for the road.
I think they're there.
I think he needs to travel more, but in terms of like how good you got to be locally, he's there.
Yeah, not a full-time Outlaw high limit deal, but I think he's ready to let's start going. Yeah. Let's start.
Last year they went to Peevely and Knoxville, right? That team did. Yeah. And Chase has been out here a few times. Yeah. Even during COVID, he came out. But I think, he needs to make sure he's maybe going to Ohio Speed Week or something like that, and mixing it up a little bit.
And I think they know that. Like going to Peevely is a.
And I think they're willing to do that. I mean, the Steeman team or whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember the first time I saw the Steeman team, we pulled in for like a ASCS race at Sealands Grove, and I'm like, oh, there's a World of Outlaw team here. That's neat. And
Yeah.
at the time, they were a 360 team.
They're really nice people too. That team.
But yeah, I do think Chase he just needs to travel more, and I think as far as a driver, I think he's like got the talent and the ability. I just think he needs to travel more. I think that's
And mentally, he's really good. He's a good person. And he's humble. He's not arrogant about it. You know, he's just got the right personality too.
So Robbie McQueen, there's your answer to that question. I don't know, Dom. I feel like you could keep going. We're at an hour and 58 minutes. I'm gonna pretty much leave it up to you. Or are we gonna call it here?
I don't want it to end. I just don't. I don't know what we would hit next. You know what I mean?
Well, what's crazy to me is we've basically talked 2 hours about the 70s, and I don't feel like you and I are comfortable talking about the 70s. Oh man, when we get to the 80s and 90s, these might be 7 hours long.
Yeah, we honestly may have to cut them in half, like doing part
We'll
one,
see
part
how they
two.
go.
Yeah, because I mean, I can tell you with the
Mow
90s.
the lawn. I'm just saying.
Yeah. Well, I mean, once we start getting into the 90s, I mean, boy, I could be long-winded.
Yeah, it could get
It's
long.
hard to put a whole decade, and I was thinking, how the hell do we talk about this whole decade? And we did okay. We hit the highlights, but you know what I'm saying. It's just
Who would be the 2 or 3 guys through the 70s that you feel like didn't get recognition that should get recognition?
apparently Lee Osborne.
I think he's...
I mean, he
I didn't know who he
coming up
was.
through the 70s. Yeah.
Yeah.
Lynn Paxton's another one that a lot of people don't think about, but he was, like I said, he was the leading feature winner at the Grove and up at Port Royal and a bunch of places through the 70s. Let's see. There's quite a few of them through there we could probably think of, but just I think we hit the major ones anyway.
Yeah.
Some guys like Sheldon Kinzer won the USAC, and Tom Bigelow set the all-time USAC winners list eventually. He came through the 70s. He actually started as a rookie at Knoxville and won 3 races his rookie year at weekly shows in Knoxville from the Quad Cities area, and then moved on to USAC there. But yeah, there's quite a few of them through there. I think we could look at Pennsylvania, and there's probably some guys we're missing there, even though
I feel like we barely touched on Ohio.
Ohio.
Would Jim Linder, would he fall into the 70s good there? And
Jim Linder was the champ at Eldora. He was one of the first ones to put the wing on. He put a plywood wing up there, and he had it at an angle, and we had the car in our museum. And I said, Jim, why is the car at that angle? He said, well, I think the chicks dug it at that angle the best. They really had no clue what they're doing when they're putting those wings on.
And
but
he would regularly go run.
Jim was good, but his brother Fred was better.
Yeah.
Fred's the Hall of Famer, and he's the All-Star champ, stuff like that. But Harold Kimmenaugh would be Chad's dad, and he was the car owner for Fred Linder and a bunch of champions through there. You mentioned Johnny Bieber earlier. He's another good one through the 70s and 80s there. Harold McGilton. I mean, we could talk about Ohio. I better mention Al Lisky. That's Brian's dad too. He was a really good driver through there. I know I'm missing some, and some people are going to text me afterwards. But
Is Chad Kimmenaugh in?
yes, he's in. Yep.
He is.
Yep.
Is Brian Kemena in?
Should be. He's not. I think mechanic is the toughest one.
What about
I really
Janet
do.
Holbrook? Did she get
She
in?
should be in too. I mean, yeah.
I remember putting up a photo saying she should be in on her social and it being
Yeah.
pretty popular.
Mhm.
But
I know somebody submitted a bio for her several years ago, so she's in front of their eyes, and I know she's made the final ballot a few times. And that's what happens is to get this final ballot with all these nominations, and there's like 70 people on there, and you're like, all these people deserve to be in, and you narrow it down to 8 every year. So it's like
So it is that high of a number that you're cutting down.
usually, yeah, because we have so many voters, and they all nominate who they think should be in. And then that makes the final ballot, and then that final ballot goes out and they vote on the final ballot. Like 3
Now,
of the drivers.
Quick question for you on the deal. I think what is it? What Hall of Fame is it where you only get on the ballot so many times and then you're no longer eligible.
That's baseball and football, I think. Yeah, and maybe hockey too. And then they have a kind of a veterans committee. We kind of do that. We have a pre-1970 category where that person has to have been active before 1970. So we kind of do it 50 years in the past to kind of catch the people that maybe slip through the cracks. You know, that's kind of like a veterans committee that the baseball Hall of Fame has, or the football. That's kind of how we do that too. So, but it's only one person every year. So,
who was the first inductee into the Hall of Fame?
There were 20.
Right? Yeah.
There were 20 in the first class. So you had Foyt, you had Jan Opperman. I think Pancho Carter was in there. Arthur and Louis Chevrolet. You know, so you had some of the pioneers of auto racing too. You know, so that's on our website, sprintcarhof.com, sprintcarhallofame.com, and you can look up by class, you know, when people got in. Tommy Hintershitz was in that first class, voted the second best driver behind Steve Kinzer in the 20th century as far as sprint cars go. Won the first race at Williams Grove, but won USAC championships, AAA championships. With a name like Hintershitz, you got to be good. I mean,
I don't think Dom realizes how big AAA used to be. Like,
well,
AAA
AJ
used to be
Foyt,
massive.
you know who AJ Foyt said was the best driver he ever saw? It was Tommy Hintershitz. That was his hero. So
that's really cool.
Going back that far, yeah. So, yeah. So those first 20, you're like, yeah. Even the following couple years, you know, you're like, obviously these people.
Did Ted Johnson get in, or was he considered eligible?
Ted was in, yeah. Long time.
I mean, on the first one.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never really kept track on who's in on the first ballot and stuff like that, other than Steve Kinzer was, and Tony was, and Richard Griffin was, you know, so guys like that.
This leads me down what I think Dom will like, because it's not as easy as you think. Who's the Mount Rushmore of sprint car racing?
Yeah,
I don't know if you could do it.
No, I couldn't do it. You know,
Put Steve on there.
I'd be picking my favorite kids. I can't do that either. You know, just which of my kids I like the best. You know,
Steve would be on there, and then after that, I think you can make an argument for a lot of people.
Steve would have to be on there. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I think you asked that question to guys from the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s. You ask 10 guys from each of those, you're probably going to get a variety.
Yeah.
Every generation had a driver nicknamed the King of the Dirt Tracks. So starting back in the 20s.
Who were they? Who were the kings of the dirt track?
Well, Gus Schrader in the 30s and 40s. I think I've sent you the, and Dom might like that list too. I've sent you the all-time career winners as far as sanction wins go, like all sanctions. You know, whether it be IMCA or I think I've sent you that spreadsheet before, but it gets updated every year.
So I'd have inhaled that.
Okay.
Well, I would touch myself to that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll get
repeatedly.
That out. I'll get that out to you guys.
Yeah.
But you know, Gus Schrader's up there at the top. Emery Collins. You know, guys that you guys haven't heard of, but they were like king of the dirt tracks back then. You know, but Steve Kinzer's obviously way at the top at sanction wins, and he has over 900 wins, man. Not sanction wise, just total, and that's crazy. I mean,
what's hilarious to me is I've been doing this 15 years. I don't have 100 wins.
Yeah,
and it's like these guys, they're winning 20 plus races a year. Like it's nothing.
Well, it's
Sammy's like 400 behind him. I mean, it's like, come on. It's like
I've been with, I think. Yeah, I've been around for like almost all of Sam's wins except for early ASCS regional stuff. And it's like, I feel like he's won a lot, and it's like he's like barely cracked 100. And I feel like he's won a lot.
But I think Sam's got a really good resume. I say that because he's not on here. But I think he has a really good resume for
I think he's underrated, but I'm biased too.
Well, I mean, the number of championships he's racked up and number of driver of the years he's got. You know, if you get driver of the year, you know.
Someday we'll talk about him leaving the Outlaw Tour. But I feel like if we could have stayed out there, I feel like if people remember our last couple of years, I feel like we were starting to get pretty damn good on the Outlaw Tour when we had to leave it.
Yeah, I think it's when I started doing his PR back when I was writing a bunch of stuff. And
I
doing
told
blogs.
Jim to go to you.
Yeah. I feel like he really took off in the 360s at that point. He was.
Yeah. Well, we'd
I think it was my writing more than anything. Probably. Yeah.
We would. He'll talk about it someday, I'm sure. But like in 2011, we were really, really good. He got his Outlaw win then. People won't remember this. We went like 11th to 2nd at Eldora Outlaw show. Like we had we were really starting to build momentum, and then behind the scenes, funding kind of fell apart. And I think we were really building something pretty cool then. We just got off track on the 410s, and the only thing you could afford to do was 360s, and it ended up being really good for him.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
Dom, I feel like you're looking up something.
I was just looking through the third turn and stuff. It's just, dude, the stats of all these old, like very, very successful guys. Like this is just, it's like bedtime stories as a little kid. Yeah. It really is. Like this is just, it scratches my brain.
It's going to school, man.
Well, I feel like we need to do way more of these. Like
I'm so lucky that I get to do this. That's my job. I get to do it. You know, it's like you're running your trucking business. Daryl's taking care of Ling Ling or whatever her name is in Vegas. What is she, 4 months along now?
Yeah, she got to be pretty close. Yeah, little Daryl Ling Ling.
He's doing the honorable thing. I mean, but you know, that's what you guys. You know, I get to do this all the time, and it's just the greatest job in the world.
There's so many things I don't think people realize. Like when we go with Bill, every year, like Bill can tell you, Sam and I will take someone new through the Hall of Fame, and Bill will give us a tour. But like, there's so much stuff people don't realize. Like the staging building has incredible stuff in it. He referred to the library earlier. I can't remember.
I didn't even know that.
I can't remember if Bill took us through the archives, but I highly suspect it was Bill. You would be blown away by that building.
We have 800,000 sprint car photos that I have access to from my computer. Yeah. Like Dave Argabright said, "You got any photos of Steve Kinzer?" I punched it in. I said, "We have 4,600. You know, you can probably pick a couple for your book. You know, sort of deal." So, you know, Dale Earnhardt Jr. did this story or the show on Lost Speedways. We supplied all his photos. You know, if you watch Indy on TV or Daytona on TV, they call us for. If they want a picture of the 67 Daytona 500, they call us. So if it's CBS or ABC or NBC. So a lot of people don't know we supply all that stuff, not just for sprint cars, but for, you know, all the racing.
You would love the archive building.
We have four people. We have 4 people working over there, digitizing video, digitizing photos. You know, we have 4 people that work there. So
we got to take you through there when you go to Knoxville this year.
Well, I'll tell you, some of the most proud things that I've ever accomplished were, one of them would be winning the National Sprint Car Rookie of the Year in 2013 for 410s, and then having our trophy from the, what was it called, the Chariots of Thunder, or the World, I don't remember what it was, but it was
the World Challenge.
It wasn't even the World Challenge. It was in Sydney, and it was a teams race. They did it one year, and it was the United States, which was 5 of us, versus Western Australia's 5, South Australia's 5. Every state of the Union in Australia had their 5 guys, and the Americans had their 5 guys, and we won the points. And I had passed the most guys, so it was like Schuhart, Harley White, myself.
I was going to say it wasn't all guys because Harley was there.
Yeah, Harley was there. I've actually, hang on, this will be cool for the podcast.
But this trophy, I think what he's saying is this trophy's in the Hall of Fame, so for people to see. We also brought in the Southern Ontario Sprints.
Yeah, you did. Hell yeah, you
trophy
did.
As well. Yeah.
And the Canadian Nationals winner.
Yeah, we've always had that plaque. Yeah.
Yeah. That one, I get a kick out of that all the time.
That one's filling up.
My favorite thing, though, you already mentioned it. My favorite thing to see, my favorite thing in the Hall of Fame is Jan Opperman's hat. That's my favorite.
That is really cool. So getting this through customs was crazy, but it's off of my right rear, and so every team had these on their right rears, their wheel covers. Yeah. So it was Brian Brown, Harley White, Logan Schuchart, Lucas Wolf, Kyle Hurst, and myself.
Yep.
And on the back, I have Sydney. My brother signed it. All my crew guys signed it. And then I put MVP of the team plus 21 cars, USA, 70 points, state of origin. I was third overall, of our finish, but we won it, and I had passed the most cars, which got us the most points.
Hell yeah.
So it was pretty cool. And like that trophy of the USA that all the drivers signed is in the Hall of Fame.
Yep.
And then that trip skewed my next trip, which was the World Series. I think it was the last year of the World Series. And then that's what got me signed up for the World Challenge, which I have my World Challenge trophy from the race there.
The person you need to talk to about that is Tom Schmay. That was his baby. Like, he loved that race.
It needs to come back, no question. That race was, like, for me it was cool, but for Australians, that was their real shot at having an opportunity to get some extra laps at Knoxville and be able to lock in. And, when you look at that win list, there's not a single slouch until you get down to 2020 or 2018 or whatever year I won it. And it's like, holy shit. They're like fucking, Darren Pittman, Danny Lasowski, Donnie Schatz, Dominic Scelzi.
I confirmed you're not the reason they canceled the race after that.
Well, I don't know why they did, but it was incredible. What was the reason?
Did Hard Knocks kill it?
No, pretty much. We weren't getting the fans on Friday night. See, when I was younger, they had the race of states.
They did a bunch of stuff.
Every driver that was the high point guy for their state got to race in the race of states, and that was one of my favorite races. And then they carried the state flag around, and that was one of my favorite races. What happened was some of the big dogs were saying, we don't want to race our car tonight. Well, that was before they had backup cars, Now you bring a backup car and you race the race of states or whatever. Well, back then they're like, no, we don't want to risk our car, So that kind of discontinued. And
There was also, and I think Dom will love this, I don't know if he knows this, they also used to do a mystery feature, Dom.
Yeah.
Which is you drew, like, who was in the feature. Like,
if
there wasn't any...
Everybody who was locked into that top 50, and they weren't racing the race of states, they were eligible for that mystery race. So if you were locked in the top 50, non-qualifiers are racing Friday night. That top 50, they'd make two features out of the race of states and the mystery feature. And that kind of morphed into what you're talking about, the World Challenge, which started as kind of a dash. And I kid Skip Jackson, because he kind of ran away with those, and they were only like 12 laps the first couple times.
Yeah.
But that kind of grew from there. And, that was a big deal. And I just think the attendance got away from them on Friday, and I thought they needed to spice it up with the Hard Knocks, and they needed to bring all the cars back that didn't qualify, and go for something meaningful like the A-Main. And I think when you do that, if you throw in a World Challenge or something like that, and you're going for that A-Main deal. They tried to do that with that golden ticket you're talking about, Dom, that you got.
Yeah.
But if you put everybody in there and you say, hey, you're racing for 4 spots in the A, I don't think you're too excited about, racing a 25 lap feature on the side,
Yeah.
Right.
And the Hard Knocks needed to happen. Like,
it's a wonderful change. Yeah.
I remember, and by the way, just remember that people that say we don't change anything about the Knoxville Nationals. Yeah, we changed a whole fucking night.
Yeah.
But I remember my first Knoxville Nationals I went to. I was still new to sprint car racing, and we got to the Friday night, and I'm like, oh man, feature. These aren't the guys I thought they would be in the feature. And then,
unless they had a lot of issues. Yeah.
What are they racing for? Oh, to start 11th in the C main on. Hard Knocks needed to happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
But yes, people, we can change things about the Knoxville Nationals, and Bill W. and I will argue about them when we get to the track.
I definitely think that like I loved the World Challenge before I ever even won it, but I definitely think there needs to be some bonus
connection.
Race on Friday. Yeah, and like that was always cool, because then when you had the World Series, and like now we have High Limit that goes down there, so it gives a lot of these guys an incentive to go race. Like it was huge for a lot of guys.
Yeah, I was in Australia in January. I'd like more of a connection. You know, I know that connection was huge back then between the Americans and the Australians. You know, I had a little girl tell me I had a weird accent, but other than that, I really didn't have a, you know, used to be people would just embrace you, and you know, vice versa, and that sort of thing, and we'd get a ton of American drivers at the Classic, and it's just not happening as much anymore. So
I'd love to see that all brought back.
That's about it.
Yeah.
Well, have we droned on long enough, fellas?
I think so. You might have to cut this into two. I don't know.
But he had a good one. This was a good one, man.
Yeah, that was fun, guys. Yep.
Thanks a lot, Bill. I don't know when we'll do the 80s, but I imagine
tomorrow works.
Well, I was gonna ask you, Dom. We going live tomorrow? Jacksonville?
Can't tomorrow. I've got a dance recital that I am not going to be missing.
Yep.
So
and I'll be at Jayville myself, so I'll wave at you.
What are you dancing to, Dom?
It's actually first night on the pole.
Oh, perfect. Excellent.
Yep.
What song are you going out to?
Probably Milkshake.
Oh, wow.
It brought me to the yard.
It brings everybody to the yard.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Yep, thank you. Give my best to Ling Ling.
She sends her best.
All right. Talk to you later.